It was a moment that will be remembered for generations. Around the world, millions of people celebrated as Barack Obama was elected the first African-American president of the United States. CNN can now project that Barack Obama, 47 years old, will become the president-elect of the United States. I asked three of his closest advisors to take us back to that moment. That was in Chicago, David Axelrod. You remember that night well. I'm sure it was an exciting moment for you, but just reflect a little bit what you were thinking and how you were feeling at that second.
Well, when the network projection came up, I was standing with David Plouffe and some people in the war room where they were getting returns. And when the words were spoken, I think we all were a little overcome. I mean, it was surreal. I mean, to hear the words that this fellow we'd worked for, who I began working for when he was a state senator, was now the president of the United States, and it was quite an emotional moment.
I can't tell you how many people all around the world who were watching us said to me over the past year, you know, as you said those words, I started to cry.
Yes.
Did you?
I'm among them. Yes. I'm among them. I mean, that's not unusual. I'm an emotional guy, but yes, I was really overwhelmed by that moment.
What about you, Anita Dunn?
We've been hearing reports all night about what a wonderful crowd it was down in Grant Park, and just, you know, it was an unusually balmy evening in Chicago. We'd scheduled an outdoor event for early November, which was risky, but it was, you know, a beautiful day. It was like a festival all day with people on the streets wearing their Obama gear and you know, and
Plouffe the crowd selling Obama gear.
Plouffe charging people for it. But we had, you know, and when we heard those words, and it was just this sense of, oh my gosh, it really happened.
Because you knew it was going to happen. It was not a great surprise, but at the moment it actually happened, when we said he was going to be the next president of the United States, it began to sink in.
It did begin to sink in. I think, you know, for many of us, earlier in the evening, when you called Ohio, and Ohio had such symbolic value after 2004, and it was like, oh my gosh, if Ohio's going this early, we may really win this thing, but when you said it, the reality sank, and it was just, you know, it was an incredible moment.
Because we had already projected not only Ohio, but Virginia and North Carolina, a lot of these battleground states, Robert Gibbs, but we were waiting for that 270 number, and it was only going to happen when the West Coast, with California and Oregon and Washington State, when they closed their polls, and it was only then that we could go on the air and say what we knew was going to happen for the last several hours.
I was with him about 45 minutes before that, when, as you mentioned, there was that time lag when you knew we'd probably gotten 270 the minute the West Coast closed. And I remember talking to him, and it was a bit surreal because at that point we did know it, but we hadn't been told it officially, in a sense. And I remember I got the same chills watching that again that I had that night, standing in a room across the hall with some folks. And I remember walking across that hall and shaking the hand of a man we now call the president-elect.
Yeah, I had spoken to him earlier in the evening after Ohio. It became clear that we were going to win Ohio, and he said, so it looks pretty good. And I said, yeah, but I'm not going to make the same mistake others made. I'm not congratulating you until we absolutely are sure. So when I saw him after you guys made your projection, he said, well, can you congratulate me now?
It's a year later now, almost exactly a year later. Robert, how has the President of the United States changed?
Wolf, not a lot. I think we would certainly all say this, and I think anybody, quite honestly, that knew him before that call was made, he hasn't changed that much. He's still the same person that we went to work for. I'm now in the 6th year of working for him, but he's down to earth. He asks you about your kids. He's concerned about your well-being as much as he is every day worried about the country's well-being. And I think it's remarkable that all of what has transpired in our lives as a result of what's happened in the last year has done remarkably little to change the person that we went to work for.
But he is Anita, he is the president now. Been the president for months, almost a year. He must have changed a little bit. Has he become more serious, more reflective? You tell me.
You know, I remember when he called me, I think it was maybe a week after the election, he called me to talk about something, and, you know, I answered the phone, and when I heard his voice, I said, you know, what is it, sir? And he said, no, since when do you call me sir? And I said, well, since you got elected president of the United States, I call you sir, you know. But he really, I think what Robert said is true. Now, of course, you know, these are serious times, and I don't think anyone understands the challenges better than the president does. But at the same time, he still has the ability that I think we all value of being in touch with, you know, people's lives and the reality of what these things mean. That, you know, what happens in Washington actually does matter to families across the country. And, you know, he still reads letters. I mean, he reads letters, and he will ask people, you know, he'll say, I read this letter today. Is this true? Can we follow up on this?
He would say this out on the campaign trail, and that he's not that far removed from not being in public life, or as David said, a state senator in Illinois. He's not that far removed from paying off student loans and understanding the day-to-day economic pressures that so many go through. And he used to say that gave him that perspective if he ever got to this office. And I think that perspective serves him well every day.
All of you, I assume, call him now Mr. President, right?
Yeah.
Even though you've known him for years and used to call him something else. But,
yes.
But it's now Mr. President, right? Nobody calls
the most awkward thing is when he walks into a meeting and David and I stand up and he sort of smirks at us like, yeah, you sit down, you don't really mean it.
Yeah, he's just happy we're getting exercise. But you know, the most significant quality among many great qualities that he has is consistency. I mean, he's a very genuine person. He is who he is. He's got a very good perspective. He takes what he's doing very seriously. He doesn't take himself too seriously, and none of that has changed. I think the only manifestation that I've seen is that his hair's a little grayer, and maybe that's where he channels it. Maybe that's where he channels the pressure. I don't know.
We've done this. If you take a look at video of him a year ago, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, he, like all of his predecessors, whether President Bush or President Clinton, they've aged. He has aged. You've seen that.
But one thing we learned during the campaign, Wolf, is that when we were at our worst, when we had our most significant challenges, he was at his calmest, he was at his most focused. So it wasn't a revelation to us that when he became president, dealing with all these horrific problems, that he would be calm, focused, as I said, consistent, and that's what we've seen.